Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Lawton. I'm the editorial director for the content studio at SC Media, a Cyber Risk Alliance brand. Welcome to today's democast presentation titled How to Threat Hunt in Your SIEM with the Right Network Data. Today's democast is sponsored by the good folks at Corelight. Presenting today's demo will be Alex Kirk. Alex is a veteran open source security evangelist with a deep engineering background. In 10 years with SourceFire Research, he wrote the team's first malware sandbox and established its global customer outreach and intelligence sharing program. He's spoken at conferences across the globe on topics from malware myth-busting to using Brozeek data for IR and threat hunting. And he was a contributing author for Practical Intrusion Analysis. His security engineering background also includes time with Cisco and Tenable. A bit about today's presentation. Threat hunting might seem out of reach, but all it truly takes is one curious person with direct access to the right data. The network, due to its breadth of visibility, offers an excellent starting point for your hunt. Traditional network logs like NetFlow, however, have left gaping blind spots on the network. That's why organizations are deploying network detection and response solutions, which fill critical gaps in the network defenses, accelerate incident response times, and unlock powerful new threat hunting capabilities. During today's democast, you'll learn to find adversaries of using common protocols like DNS to conduct exfiltration and C2 communications. You'll spot adversaries communicating over encrypted network protocols without decrypting the traffic and turn successful hunts into automated detections. With that, it's time to kick things off. Alex, welcome to the broadcast. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and start off today with a very brief overview of what threat hunting actually is and how it's more accessible than you might think. We're going to follow that with some thoughts on the importance of network data in that hunting process and how having the right kinds of data makes a major difference in the process. We'll then spend the majority of the session demonstrating the power of the right data provided by Corelight inside of your security stack. We'll close with Q&A, which I hope will be as engaged and interactive as possible for what might be the fourth or fifth Zoom session of the day for some folks. So let's start with a discussion of the ingredients necessary for threat hunting. First, you'll obviously need data to be able to hunt through, and as much detail as possible, typically done through as many sources as possible so that no one source has a chance to miss where another one left off. Next, you'll need people to actually look at the data with some sort of an idea about what they want to do with that data, what questions they want to ask, how often they need to ask those questions, and what to do if they find something funny along the way. Of course, those people will want tools that simplify the process of looking at the data, that do safe searches, dashboards, normalizations, that sort of thing, so they can spend more time interpreting the data than manipulating it. Most organizations will want some sort of threat intelligence, known indicators of compromise that'll generate alerts and kick off investigations. And many SOCs have some level of automation that they'll apply to their processes, whether that's just basic in-house scripting to handle the most mundane of jobs, or a full-blown SOAR that helps large, mature organizations manage what is often a tremendously large event flow from their detection tools. We're going to have a primary focus today on just these three starter items because they're all that's strictly necessary for you to begin the process of looking for weird, which is the less intimidating but still perfectly descriptive name for threat hunting. Since the data that you're going to be analyzing is the foundation upon which the entire threat hunt process is built, let's dig in a bit into how exactly that data is collected and managed inside of security organizations. For those at the lower end of the maturity curve, there may not even be a steady stream of monitoring that analysts can rely on. They'll need to turn on logs from specific devices on demand or ask for a monitoring tool to be connected to a new subnet. The data itself might be missing key elements or have large amounts of irrelevant noise in it, and it's unlikely to be mapped between sources for a coherent picture. It's also likely that the data exists in multiple different consoles, forcing analysts to swivel between them to ask a single question. For organizations that are getting more serious and have more practice doing this job under their belt, they'll have structural permanent visibility points, not necessarily covering their entire network, but in important north-south choke points or at high visibility assets in a DMZ or the like. They'll have reviewed their data sources enough to ensure that they have everything they need and as little as possible of what they don't. They'll also have the bulk of their data centralized, most likely in a SIEM, to minimize context switching pain for their analysts. The most advanced shops will have collaborated with their networking teams and their vendors to get full coverage of their environment. They'll ensure that their data is mapping into a standardized model or framework for structure and cleanliness, and they'll have a very clear data management strategy that not only centralizes everything in a single pane of glass, but also includes best practices for rotating older data into colder storage to keep SIEM costs reasonable while still ensuring that in the event of a long-running breach being discovered, they can turn back the clock and see what happened and what the scope of the problem really is. To get a bit more concrete here, let's talk about where exactly all this data is coming from. So fundamentally, there are two sources of data for information security, the endpoint and the network, both of which feed your SIEM. Now, just to level set here, despite me being from a network-oriented vendor, I'm not here to tell you that you should ditch your endpoint logs. There are details they provide that are invisible to the network but still important to investigations. I do, however, want to counter the pitch I've heard from EDR vendors about not needing an NDR solution because they cover the network traffic from an endpoint point of view. And the problem is that that view is myopic at best. Obviously, you'll have endpoint problems in any deployment measured in the thousands or more. Log transport's going to fail somewhere, agents get out of date, whatever. Then there are all the devices that you can't put EDR on in the first place. IoT and OT systems, critical Linux servers, point-of-sale devices that you still need to watch closely for signs of compromise. Your data will be structured to ask micro-scale questions instead of macro-scale ones. Yes, you can see the network from the endpoint, just not well enough. Then, of course, there's the reality that endpoint logs can and have been compromised by attackers. You can hurt the kernel for writes to EDR processes all day long, but you can't change a packet as it crosses the wire. Sure, you can encrypt your traffic from prying eyes, but you can't change the number of packets you're sending as you exfiltrate data, or the fact that you're sending it to a bulletproof hosting farm with an SSL certificate from last week. So now that you see the value of network data for security operations, let's take a look at how it's being done in the field today. Typically, it looks something like this, where you're collecting data from a ton of different production systems, app servers, security devices, network appliances, you name it. It's all coming in different formats from different vendors with no concept of normalization between the sources at all. Sure, you can use IPs, ports, and timestamps to glue it all together until you get NTP skew or a NAT translation that makes it harder than it should be. Analysts are forced to be living ETL devices, spending more time normalizing data than analyzing it. Of course, the problem of stitching all this data together assumes that you get it in the first place, that a sysadmin didn't turn off logging on a firewall to save CPU, that you get 100% compliance out of your branch office IT staff, and that none of the hundreds of other places where things could go wrong actually do. And of course, even if you manage to get every feed from every place, it might still be missing valuable data. DNS servers like bind an Active Directory don't log query responses by default, which leaves you with a gaping visibility hole if you're trying to figure out whether a client making a suspect lookup actually got owned. So now that I've shown you the wrong way to get network data, let's talk about the right way to do it. First, you'll want to minimize the number of collection points you have to maintain. A single source that parses live traffic feeds is ideal. You'll want a single coherent format for your data, a common language that it can all speak instead of translating back and forth. There should be less detail about your state tables and memory consumption and more detail about what's happening at an application and a user layer. The data should be security-oriented. Port flapping details are great for a NOC, but you're probably more interested in a MIME type mismatch if you're working in a SOC. And finally, you'll want to act not as a bump in the wire, so that not only do you not accidentally melt the network and cause the CIO to tell the CISO to turn your device off, but so that an attacker can't notice a block and then turn that into reverse engineering which security tools you have, which of course tells them how to evade your specific defenses. Using Corelight as a central source of network data is the easy button for solving the problems with traditional network security collection setups. Consolidating into a single platform lightens the administrative overhead and reduces points of failure. Our standardized data format removes all of the parsing headaches SOCs are used to by not only expressing the data in a single language, but by laying down unified timestamps as well as a per-connection unique identifier, which glues together the layer 4 network details with the layer 7 application information all the way through any files transported over those layer 7 protocols. It records every security detail an analyst could need, from the HTTP response code or the SSL certificate subject to file hashes and flow size details across all of the important protocols on your network. It even integrates that data directly into our alerting mechanisms, our encrypted traffic analytics, and every major third-party data model on the planet. The Corelight platform does all of this in a non-intrusive way that integrates with the rest of your security stack. Our devices take copies of packets directly from the wire, whether from a span port off a legacy switch at a retail location, a packet broker in the data center, or a virtual tap in the cloud, and analyze them all out of band where they can't cause a failure or alert an attacker to their presence. They then export not only the raw network evidence, the metadata for every connection crossing your wires, but also analytic detail about what those connections mean and which of them might be malicious, sending them upstream to your SIEM or other analytics platform. For those so inclined, Corelight can also feed malware sandboxes and DLP solutions with full-size copies of files, deduped at a rate of 15,000 a minute. All of this raw data then becomes the basis for simple, easy, yet highly effective threat hunting capabilities. Vastly accelerated incident response with single pivot access to everything analysts need, and whatever other detection technology you want to implement, whether it's from Corelight or another vendor. But instead of me talking more about all of these outcomes in the abstract, let's move on to the actual demonstration portion of the talk. We're going to start with DNS and use it to spot not only tunneling activity, but also other bad behavior that's present in most environments. We'll follow that with examples from protocols like SMB and DCE-RPC, the powerful yet often poorly understood east-west protocols. Next will be our IDS section, with a focus on how integrated metadata can make that technology better. Then we'll talk about a pair of innovations out of Corelight's research arm, which detect command and control across a variety of protocols and provide rich detail about encrypted sessions without the need to be man in the middle or otherwise decrypt a single packet. We'll wrap up with a discussion about improving SOC efficiency through effective mapping into various data models, as well as automation via SOAR. Now, just to set the stage here, Corelight's philosophy has always been that we never want to force you to pivot into yet another console, and instead we want to make the tools where you're already centralizing security data and process better. That in mind, I'm going to be demoing Corelight data in Splunk today, as they're used by a majority of our customers and are leaders in the market space. IOCs, policy violations, etc. Despite its obvious utility, too many organizations lack proper visibility into DNS. Some of them set up their monitoring tools past their internal resolvers so they never see true client IPs. Others use logging systems that don't provide important details like the answers to queries issued. A well-placed Corelight sensor can solve this problem immediately. We log every part of the DNS transaction in a format that makes it easy to detect anomalous activity. Like many other tools, it can generate alerts on known bad domain names, but can also do more interesting things like looking for queries that come back with NX domain replies, which can highlight everything from attacker infrastructure to more mundane issues like old, unmaintained tools calling out for updates that no longer exist. Tracking the query types used within your organization can be a goldmine as well. Take, for example, these null queries. They're abnormal in any environment, but stick out as a potential DNS tunnel the second you look closely at the details within them. This can easily be expanded, of course, to look for things like MX records, lookups from non-mail servers, or other things that don't make sense for the systems you're defending. Protocol compliant attacks can be found with Corelight data as well. Take, for example, this query that pulls out DNS names longer than 25 characters, longer than a human will normally type, and displays them by frequency. While some of the infrequently visited sites here are CDNs, update infrastructures, and other legitimate traffic, a different style of DNS tunnel becomes very obvious when you dig into this record here. Not only are the queries themselves suspiciously like hexadecimal strings, the answers are just as obvious of an ASCII encoded binary chain as well. But perhaps the most important reason you'll want to monitor DNS from network traffic instead of production servers is an obvious yet overlooked one: clients using non-sanctioned servers to do their resolutions. Those lookups are invisible to traditional logging setups and are much more likely to be non-compliant than resolutions going through normal systems. In the case of one of our customers' logs from the Sunburst attack, they would have actually been an early indicator that something nefarious was afoot, since as you can see here, infected clients were doing DNS resolution through a system that lives in AWS and was not under the customer's control. As important as monitoring north-south traffic like DNS is, looking at your east-west traffic can be extremely important as well for detecting everything from advanced lateral movement to bad employee behavior. Let's take a closer look at a few of the east-west protocols that Corelight parses. SMB, the Windows file sharing protocol, is a great place to start, both because of how important file sharing is on enterprise networks and what a powerful tool SMB is for remote system management. For example, this call out to LSA-RPC, the local security authority's remote procedure call interface, allows for modification of system security policies, so it better be coming from a well-known system with an excellent rationale behind it. Monitoring who's touching what files is great from a policy enforcement and DLP perspective. You certainly don't want anybody accessing HR-driven PII, and from a general security perspective, since someone dropping a DLL in a software directory should also have a very good explanation if you go and ask them. File monitoring also gives you a chance to catch ransomware in the act, or at the very least see who patient 0 was and what exactly they were doing on the network before disaster struck. Corelight also covers other important system management protocols like DCERPC. We break down exactly what operation happened on what service and on what name pipe, which in this case is a very suspicious combination indeed. Behavioral analytics become very easy with this sort of data as well. For example, it's a huge red flag when looking at a session like this that lasted less than a second and yet contained create, start, open, and delete calls for a single service. We can also add authentication data to the mix with Kerberos and NTLM monitoring as well. For users looking for a large library of pre-built detections, IDS has always been a go-to technology. But one of the biggest problems with IDS has always been the hassle of getting data to validate alerts. Analysts have to either log into entirely different consoles, ask other departments for logs, or even just construct complex queries to line up with other data sources in a centralized SIEM. Let's take a look at a Corelight Suricata event for the download of an executable file and how we would triage it as a comparison. As you can see here, the alerts are just another Corelight log in the same format and delivery stream as the rest. We've got all the standard data in this alert, the signature and its ID, the category and metadata around the signature, as well as some other details like which detection bits have been previously set on the stream that generated this alert. The most important piece, however, is this UID. If we take it and put it into our search bar, we'll quickly see all of the associated logs for this stream coming up. First on the list is our files log, which contains the pre-computed hash for this file, which allows us to pop it into a system like VirusTotal to see if it's a known piece of malware, either manually like we've just done here or automatically in a SOAR. Scrolling through the other logs in here, we see everything from the layer 4 connection log to other Suricata events. This one is specific to data within the executable file, to the HTTP log, which shows things like an IP address where an HTTP host name would normally go, and a URI that was trying to hide this executable as a PNG. It's everything an analyst could need in one simple pivot. Of course, this same ease of investigation holds true across all types of Suricata events. Take this directory traversal alert against a web server. Not only was it obviously a well-structured attack, but the server responded with a 200 OK instead of a 404. And we can also see that a file came down as well, which you could use the hash of to validate whether it was actually Etsy password or a more graceful application layer error. Or we can look at this alert for a malware check-in, where we can quickly see our infected system sending strange post data to a randomly named URL on a very suspicious host. Sticking with the detections theme, let's turn to the latest innovation out of Corelight Labs, our C2 collection. Built to look for command and control across HTTP, DNS, and ICMP, it focuses on protocol fundamentals that are difficult for attackers to alter, like header ordering, field and packet length, and expected entropy, and it's paired with a healthy dose of specific detections against prominent malware families like domain generation algorithms for GOSI and Emotet HTTP fingerprinting. Even before delivery to our first customers, these algorithms have proven their worth in the wild through our Polaris program, which currently provides the Corelight Labs team with 80 gigs per second of live customer traffic that they can use for validating their work. The C2 detections in Polaris have already caught red teams in action with tools like Cobalt Strike and Interpreter, all manner of vulnerability scans, and of course, plenty of live malware to boot. Take, for example, this TrickBot detection. You can see that this is one of our proprietary algorithms focused on HTTP analysis, and that for this one host, we had multiple hits across detection algorithms, increasing our confidence that any one of them is a legitimate detection. If you follow the lead in the messages and check the HTTP log, you'll quickly see that things are in fact amiss. It's definitely not a good thing when you get a post to a URI with a computer name in it. These DGA detections are easy to follow as well. We can see that this one host hit 49 domains associated with the Gozi malware family. The queries are directly in record for easy human validation, along with details like this is collision heavy field, which is comp sci professor speak for is it likely this will generate false positives in the wild. ICMP tunneling alerts follow the same pattern, giving the analyst plenty of detail they can use to begin remediation. Working with encrypted traffic is a common task in the SOC and one that many people think network monitoring solutions can't do anything about. The reality, however, is a bit less cut and dry than you might think. Open source Zeek has long been able to parse details about the certificate handshake and the SSL connection itself. You can see here things like the cipher and elliptic curve in use, which are great for detecting vulnerabilities like Curveball, the silent code execution bug that the NSA issued an emergency warning about last year, as well as details like the JA3 hash, this badly out-of-date SSL version, and even a pre-computed validation status. This particular self-signed cert happens to use the Internet Widgets PTY organization that's a default out of most certificate generation tools. And while sometimes that's just a lazy sysadmin, I've also seen it serve as a tip-off for investigations that found attackers who had eluded other defenses. Similar details are logged for SSH connections as well, like the banner strings exchanged, the host key, and the algorithms in use. Where things start getting more interesting are these inferences, another Corelight Labs innovation. Based on statistical analysis of packet size and timing, among other factors, the set of algorithms we call our encrypted traffic collection can tell the difference between a script, as seen here with an automated login, automatic interaction, and a large file upload, versus a sysadmin typing away at a keyboard. It can also tell when actors are hopping from one system to another to avoid detection, among a variety of other detections across SSH, SSL, and now in our latest release, RDP and encrypted DNS. This generic encryption detection algorithm can also spot things like custom crypto and plain text when encryption was expected, which found plain text LDAP over the encrypted port in a live Polaris environment. Of course, no one detection technology can take care of all of your security needs, which means that one of the most important criteria for any tool in your security environment should be how well does this integrate with the rest of my tools and processes? The answer for Corelight is that integration is our specialty. We work well with products across the space. Our engineering teams have done the hard work of mapping into things like Splunk's Common Information Model, which brings our data seamlessly into their pre-built dashboards, and analytics tools like Enterprise Security. We fit into the Elastic Common schema, which enables the most popular open source SIEM in the market. And we work with a growing list of other respected analytics vendors. Many of the vendors you see on this list actually came to us asking for help ensuring they were correctly mapping our data format, thanks to either senior architects on their side who knew the power of Corelight data and were demanding it, or customers of theirs requesting the integration after seeing the ease and power of instrumenting their network data through Corelight. Open source projects like Rita, the famous beacon detection tool, Wireshark, the de facto UI for packet analysis, and Sigma, the cross-SIEM detections language, all have direct integrations to our data and are friendly and collaborative behind the scenes. Our high-throughput file extraction, one customer processes 15,000 files a minute, can feed a variety of malware sandboxes, DLP products, and other analytics tools. Perhaps most importantly on the integrations front, Corelight support automatically includes access to dedicated engineering integration support. Our technical account management team will work directly with you to enable integration or workflow, whatever it is you're trying to do, as part of our mission to be the foundation of your successful network security strategy. Standardized, easily pivotable data makes automation easy too. Let's take a look at a Corelight authored Phantom playbook that's available on GitHub today as an example of how this works. We're targeting an alert for a potentially malicious DNS lookup. one of the most common event types you'll see in a modern SOC. This specific playbook is written to take suricata alerts as input, but you can easily generalize it to any tool alerting on a domain name and implement it in the SOAR of your choice. The first thing we do is query the Corelight DNS logs using the UID that links the suricata alert to the session that triggered it. We filter based on the presence of answers, since if it was an NX domain or a firewall blocked it, there's nothing more to investigate. If there were answers, we loop through them, building a search that looks for connections from the host that did the suspicious lookup to any of the IP addresses returned as answers. After checking that connections occurred and bytes were actually transferred on them, we grab one set of indicators for HTTP, the host, the URI, the user agent, the MIME type of any files that came back. If it's SSL, we get the certificate subject, its validation status, the JA3, etc. If any files were observed, we query our logs for their SHA hash and use that to pivot into the reputation system of your choice. Finally, we check to see if any suricata alerts were generated on these connections, which not only gives us better context around the initial lookup, but helps us kill multiple birds with one stone by grouping events. It's easy to respond to clean detections like known malware hashes too. You just drag, drop, and add an action statement here. You can easily do things like dropping the device into a quarantine VLAN or using an ACL on the firewall to block it altogether. The most important part, of course, is the output to your analysts. Instead of spending minutes typing queries and waiting for searches to return, they can now come into an event and immediately see everything they need to in order to determine whether something was a false positive or in need of further escalation.
Thank you for that informative presentation, Alex. Now it's time for us to look at some of the questions that have come in. As a reminder, if you have a question, just select the Q&A button at the bottom of the console. If we're not able to get to all the answers today, your questions will be turned over to Alex and his team. They'll get back to you within a couple of days. Okay, looks like we've got some questions here. The first one is, how does Corelight decrypt traffic?
So Corelight actually doesn't decrypt the traffic because there's just so much information that we can get without going through all of the technical, legal, and privacy hassle of being the man in the middle and pulling packets apart. By paying attention to things like certificate details and the setup of an SSL session, packet size and timing in SSH, and similar details across things like RDP, you can actually get a wealth of information about what's going on in an encrypted connection without attempting to actually decrypt it. So that's the philosophy we've gone with, particularly in light of some of the issues that are coming with TLS 1.3 and other improvements in encryption going forward.
Okay, next question. Do you think this approach can replace my packet capture solution?
So from an operational perspective, most of the time, yes. You really wouldn't need to get all the way to packets to track down an incident with this level of metadata detail. Now, from a compliance or other sort of perspective, there might be reasons to keep your packet capture around. And certainly in those cases, the Corelight data is going to be an index into exactly what you need very rapidly. But part of the other reason that we think this does replace PCAP for the most part is that instead of you getting, a couple of weeks, maybe 30 or 60 days worth of retention if you're really well funded, we've got customers who have years worth of these logs, and we're able to really go back in time and see what happened quickly with them.
Can I get this kind of data from my AWS traffic?
Yeah, it's actually quite easy to stand up one of the Corelight cloud devices in environments like AWS. They have the virtual tap option that's very easy to get packets flowing to security devices with. And so really all you need to do is spin up one of our cloud sensors, feed the packets our way, and you'll be off to the races.
Fantastic. Okay, next question. Great demo, thanks, but I noticed it was all done in Splunk. Do you also support Elastic?
Yeah, absolutely. We are actually agnostic in terms of where our data goes to upstream. While that doesn't mean that we haven't done the hard work of mapping into things like the Elastic Common schema, for example, what it does mean is that regardless of which SIEM or analytics tool you're using, we're happy to forward the data along to them over standardized formats that make it easy for them to pick up on the far side. This was all done in Splunk today because, again, they're sort of market leaders, but this applies to any tool out there.
Okay. We're actually at the bottom of the hour. If you can answer this last question real quickly, do you have any recommendations for threat hunting training classes?
Actually, one thing I would recommend that folks do is go ahead and click the handout button on the far right of your screen to get access to Corelight's free threat hunting guide. We've actually aligned that document with the MITRE ATT&CK framework to give you an idea about what our technology can do with respect to all those different TTPs. So between that and training options that are available for Corelight customers, we're happy to help you figure this all out and get going.
Well, thanks for reminding them to click that button. I was going to do that next. This does conclude today's Q&A portion of the presentation. I want to thank everyone who submitted questions. If there are any questions that were submitted that we didn't get to, those will be turned over to Alex and his team. They'll be able to get back to you shortly. Thanks again to Alex and Corelight for being with us today and sharing all that great information. And of course, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's democast and will join us again in the future. So good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you may be. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.